This is PNC Roundtable.
Hello, this is Ric DeVore, Regional President for PNC Bank, and thank you for listening to PNC Roundtable. It's on this show that we tackle some of the region's tough issues with people who make a difference.
Now here's the PNC Roundtable.
Welcome into our PNC Roundtable. PNC, a leading integral financial institution that cares about the community and the issues affecting it, which is why we come together with our co-host for the program, Regional President of PNC Bank, Ric DeVore. Ric, nice to see you as always.
Good to see you, Paul.
And it's always nice to see the guy that you've brought in as a very special guest to talk about the new Michigan strategy, the President and CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan, Doug Rothwell.
Well, it's great to be here, Paul W., and with Ric DeVore. You know, you guys couldn't ask for two bigger boosters of Michigan to be with.
Well, the three biggest boosters then altogether here, because we do care about this great state. We hate to see some of the things that are, Sophie always says, don't use the word hate, Daddy. We really don't want to see what's been going on lately between the city of Detroit and the mayor and the state of Michigan and the governor, and we're hoping that we can get everybody together because, as I said during the auto talks, I say here, we win, we win. If we win, we win. If we lose, we all lose. We can't have a winner and a loser here. We got to be in this together as a city and as a state. And certainly, Douglas, you know that.
Well, it's going to happen, Paul W., because it has to. There really is no alternative. And sometimes, just like getting legislation adopted, it's kind of messy in the process. But the outcome is going to be terrific for Detroit because really there are so many great things happening in the city right now. If we can get this fiscal cloud out of our way, bright days are ahead.
And I've kind of half joked about the fact that it's happening in the business community, whether the city government likes it or not. And certainly, Ric, you've seen that. There are so many great things happening in business now in Michigan that you kind of say, well, okay, let's get this government thing worked out because the business people are not waiting any longer. They've made the moves and are continuing to move in a positive direction.
No, that's correct. I mean, you've seen it at the statewide level. You see it in Southeast Michigan and in the city of Detroit. So it's almost like we're succeeding in spite of ourselves, so to speak, in terms of the government side. And once again, manufacturing is really leading the way in this recovery. So it's really a shame what's going on right now because there's so many positive things, and I'm worried that it's going to take away from that positive feeling and that momentum.
We have to do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Doug, your organization, Business Leaders for Michigan, is truly an organization that promotes strategies for making Michigan a top 10 state for job, economic, and personal income growth. The organization guided by the Michigan Turnaround Plan. For those unfamiliar, could you once again remind everybody about it?
Yeah, the turnaround plan was developed, Paul, actually a couple of years ago, and we just updated it last month to provide a roadmap for both state leaders as well as the community as to how we get to be top 10. And it's based on a lot of benchmarking that we've done over the last few years to look at how Michigan stacks up to the places that we aspire to be. And it's a 6-step plan. The first 5 steps are basically a to-do list for government of how to manage your finances and the budget and making Michigan a more competitive place. And then we added a 6th step this year, which really identifies enduring assets in Michigan that we could better leverage to grow the economy.
And that's the part of the new Michigan strategy.
Exactly right. And so what we're trying to do is to kind of paint a vision for what Michigan can be, what it would look like if we were a top 10 state by basically leveraging what's already here today that we're good at that the rest of the world needs.
And Ric, I know you agree that the state is doing better. We're making progress, as you've mentioned, but that's why the plan is more important than ever.
Oh, I really think so. And, you know, we've really laid a good foundation from a tax standpoint with this current administration led by Governor Snyder. And you see what's going on. You and I have talked in the past where May or June, people were putting off making major decisions, both on the consumer front and the corporate front. And I would say that consumer and corporate confidence was eroded. But at some point, you have to make some decisions. And we saw that in the fall where the equipment's wearing out, whatever, and you just had to move on. And I think a lot of, manufacturing as well as other businesses are moving on, making those decisions, and we're seeing a lot of loan growth this year as well as at the tail end of last year.
Well, and frankly, Doug, you have stayed optimistic throughout all of this? Why or how, I guess, have you stayed so optimistic and bullish about Michigan's future?
Well, it's two things. One is that we have this great base of assets, as I mentioned earlier, that I think sometimes we don't appreciate, but other people around the country look to and say, boy, we'd love to have the higher education system you have, or the geographic location where you've got the shortest routes to Asia, the big growth markets, or where you've got this great agricultural and natural resource base. These are things that a lot of other places don't have. But the other reason why we're bullish is because of what Rick just said, which is that we finally have people in Lansing that are getting state government managed the way it needs to be able to provide the basic services that we need. And once that happens, that gives business a reassurance that there's going to be fiscal stability so they can get on with their own plans.
Oh, absolutely.
And as we heard from the governor while he was making his European trip and would check in on our morning show, he was still talking to a lot of people in the auto industry and suppliers specifically to come here. We know that the auto industry is always going to be important to Michigan's economy, and thank God they've been coming back so strong and how that's helped turn Michigan around. But we still need to diversify in as many ways as we possibly can. How are we going about doing that now, Doug Rothwell?
Well, I think, Paul W., first of all, let's recognize that the auto industry is going to be here, as you said, for a long time to come, and we want it to be. Only 10% of the world has access to personal transportation. That means 90% doesn't, and there's no reason why Michigan can't be the place that develops the solutions and the products and services to provide that. But diversification, yeah, we absolutely need to do it, and we have been doing it, but we need to do it in a way that builds off the assets that are here. So, example, engineering is a great byproduct of the auto industry, but engineering is going to be something that the rest of the world needs in terms of increasing the productivity and providing more increases in per capita income. That's a great example of taking what we already have and using it to diversify.
You know, you're from Michigan, Rick.
Right.
You're back home, and we're glad that you are heading up PNC Bank now. And you've certainly seen our natural resources, and they play an important role in the future of this great state, Michigan's natural resources, agriculture, energy, tourism, exports. Talk a little bit about that, and then Doug can join in as well.
Well, I think a lot of people outside the state don't really realize in terms of say in the ag space, if you just look at, what's going on with Kellogg and other firms, we have a great tradition of agriculture in this state. I know Debbie Stabenow leads the subcommittee in ag, and I think it's surprising to a lot of people when she talks about just the commitment to the state has to ag. You couple that with the life sciences, especially, say, out of Kalamazoo, with Bill Parfit and some of the folks, not only at ex-Upjohn folks, but Stryker. And I think a lot of times people don't think life sciences, don't think agriculture when they think Michigan. They think of heavy reliance on auto, and that's always going to be part of our heritage, but there's a lot more going on here, especially coupled with the state, the natural resources, not to mention tourism, which is just a phenomenal industry for the state.
And well, it should be. And we just had an agriculture week, remembering how important agriculture is. We can't forget that. We have a lot of farmers within the sound of my voice that are the backbone of Michigan in so many ways. And we get into that energy, the tourism, the exports, and all of that. There's a lot of Michigan's natural resources that we have to allow to play the role they should in our future.
Well, and so, Paul W., again, we looked at what does the world need over the next 10 or 20 years, and what we see is that food is becoming increasingly scarce. Natural resources are playing a larger role because as we adopt more technology, that equipment that we use every day requires precious materials and minerals that we have a lot of. Water is going to be a huge deciding factor where business locates in the future. So, again, Michigan has these assets. If we can figure out ways to sustainably utilize these, we're a logical place for a lot of business to locate.
And a lot of people need and will want our water and will try to take it in the years to come. And so we have to, first of all, be good guardians and protect the water so nobody can say, well, you guys are ruining you got all the fresh water and you're not handling it well. We need to take it over. And we have to be aware that people are going to want what we have in Michigan.
And there's no reason why, Paul W., we can't make that happen. I mean, let's take, high technology manufacturing companies use a lot of water in their production methods, but that water can be recycled staying within the Great Lakes Basin. The issue is, let's not lock it up and feel like we can never touch it. Let's use it, but let's use it in a way that doesn't deplete the resource for the long term.
What I like, too, Doug Rothwell is here, President, CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. I'm Paul W. Smith, along with my co-host, Regional President, PNC Bank, Ric DeVore. I love in the New Michigan Strategy positioning Michigan as a higher education marketplace. Now, this is fabulous and obviously extremely important to Michigan's future.
There's no doubt about it. And we have, again, I think sometimes Michiganders, we take these assets for granted, whether we're talking about University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, which, by the way, all three CEOs are board members of Michigan Business Leaders. But, take Michigan, for example. Of all the public universities in this country, they get the most research dollars, more than University of Texas, and they've passed Johns Hopkins, and so I think we tend to take that for granted. Why is that important? Well, that's important because that's where the entrepreneur connection is. I think Michigan and Wayne State and Michigan State have done a good job of partnering with entrepreneurs, seeding capital to them, and that's what I think not only attracts some of these young people but retains them. Then you throw in sense of place, or I should say our natural resources. We've talked a lot on this program, Paul, of people come to a place, not necessarily to a job. And I think if you add that together, we're becoming a very attractive alternative to the two coasts.
Well, and Paul W., the other thing you add then to that even is look at the demand for people wanting to get in these universities. I mean, we are turning away thousands of kids every year that want to get to Michigan universities. Good example, North Dakota's higher education system, over 40% of their students come from out of state. This is North Dakota. Now, not to put down their institutions, but I would put Michigan's institutions up against theirs any day.
It's okay to put them down.
Well, I'm going to put them down then. Well, let's put them down. The heck with North Dakota. By God. But, let's look at Michigan and you think if we just opened the doors more and looked at this as an economic engine, our higher education universities, think of the number of jobs we could be creating at both within the universities as well as in their communities.
Yeah, and speaking of jobs, for a state that saw so many people leaving for so long because they couldn't get a job, now we're looking at real worker shortages. I got a note the other day from Teresa Ghaffari, President and CEO of G-Tech Services Incorporated, at the end of March having this jobs fair. They have 1,000 contract or direct hire positions to fill for automotive designers and IT professionals as well as engineers in all disciplines. 1,000 great jobs that they're looking for people for. We have a worker shortage. So with not enough students in the pipeline to meet tomorrow's demands here in our area, how are you guys proposing that we change that? And I'll start with you, Ric.
Well, I would agree with Governor Snyder's plan of trying to do a better job of forecasting what the needs are versus just putting out graduates and, there's no match, if you will. It's kind of a supply and demand issue. And I think what he's trying to do on the website and so forth is trying to connect where the jobs are with the universities in advance. Versus, I got a degree, now let me go look for a job. And so I think it's that matching or that forecasting that's pretty important.
And what do the business leaders of Michigan say about this?
Well, exactly just what Ric said. I mean, there's close to 80,000 job openings that the governor cited as needing to be filled right now. And a lot of it, Paul W., is that we just have this mismatch of people, education that they're getting is not matching what the demands are in the marketplace. And part of it is, the engineering issue you mentioned is that, kids are shying away from going into those technical fields as much, nearly more than they should. And we need to correct that going forward.
I wonder how we do that. Through education, I guess, but I wonder how we convince them that it is a good place to go.
Well, partly is, I think here, at least in Michigan, is a lot of those jobs are associated with the manufacturing industry, and unfortunately, manufacturing has a bad image. Part of it is getting the kids exposed to what today's manufacturing is, and part of it is also getting them exposed to the job opportunities and the pay that comes with it compared to whatever other fields they might be looking at. One of the things on the new website, MyTalent, mitalent.org, is that you can actually calculate what your future wages will be in different fields. And I think that's a way to get at what Rick talked about earlier.
mitalent.org. Michigan Talent. mytalent.org. mitalent.org. Good place to go. We know that our universities are widely recognized for their tremendous strengths in research and development. And that's important, obviously, and that should be translating into jobs as well.
There's no doubt about it. And I think, what we're hoping to do is, through the entrepreneurial spirit of some of these universities, trying to marry company growth with some of the new high-tech applications. So, for instance, if we can marry, let's say there's a doctor that's practicing medicine at University of Michigan, but he or she has an idea about a new patent. If the university can seed that startup company, and then if it takes off, use part of that money in its foundation, and then that we can get those jobs right here. Now you've had a win-win. We retain that doctor, in my example. We get the jobs here, and the university definitely benefits because they get more money in their foundation. I think that's really what Mary Sue and Luana are trying to do. That model, by the way, is used very often at Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh.
Speaking of Pittsburgh and the area, and it kind of reminds me of some of the research corridor that we have. The fact that Michigan is focusing on really establishing itself as a life sciences hub, and that's over and above the thoughts that some people had, as it turned out incorrectly, that we were in big trouble in terms of Michigan's life sciences ability when Pfizer pulled out of our state. What we found, though, is some great people who found themselves out of jobs did not find themselves without entrepreneurial spirit. And many other companies have come from some of those people, and it's still important that we establish ourselves as a life sciences hub. And I think that the business leaders for Michigan, and you, Doug Rothwell, agree.
Yeah, we do. And in fact, if we have a venture capital fund ourselves, Business Leaders for Michigan does, and if you were to ask me what is the sector that we are able to find the most successful businesses to invest in, by far, it's life sciences. And not just in Ann Arbor, also, as Rick mentioned, over in Kalamazoo, other places around the state. And I think it comes from exactly what you said, is that an inherent expertise that is the legacy, if you will, of many of these pharmaceutical companies like Upjohn, Pfizer, others that we had, and new ones that have replaced them, the Strykers, the Perigos, some of the other life science firms, plus the hospital system that we have. So the point of all of this is that this is a hugely growing industry. As we all get older, we need more quality of life and more medical care, and Michigan's got an inherent strength that we have to meet that need.
Well, it seems like that we do, and that we will continue to grow that, nurture that. Meanwhile, we lost a lot of our kids to Chicago. They are said to hold the title of gateway to the Midwest, but we're competing in this space.
We are, and Chicago is virtually landlocked and over-congested out. What we mean is that if you look at your own personal situation, you're getting more goods and services shipped directly to your door every day. Exponential growth of the supply chain, and Chicago can only handle so much more growth. Their airport is landlocked. Their water ports are really too far from the deep water ports of the coast to accommodate growth. Their highways are certainly congested. In Detroit and in Michigan, we can be the alternative gateway to the Midwest, where 50% of the market is to service North America. So we believe it's ours to lose. We do, though, then have to invest in the infrastructure to support it, whether that be a bridge over the Detroit River, a rail tunnel, expanding the airport and the Aerotropolis idea that Bob Vacano's talked about, all of the above to take advantage of this opportunity.
But is there statewide support for this, or is it just Southeast Michigan support?
All of Michigan can compete and be part of this, Paul W. Not probably to the same degree as Southeast Michigan, but the whole state can play, yes.
And you're seeing that as well, Rick?
Oh, absolutely. And you think about just the logistics part. Let's take shipping for a minute. Unless they build a canal across the bottom of Michigan, it's quite a savings from a time standpoint. You have to go all the way up and around Mackinac, all the way down to Chicago, and then when you get there, the point of the congestion is a big issue, especially as you get more and more of your goods shipped by the guy in the brown shirts at the brown truck, right, that you've ordered online. It's really become an issue with congestion in the city of Chicago. So while we're not arguing that Chicago's not a great place to live and recreate, we are saying, though, just in terms of logistics, that maybe we're a better answer.
And this is a greater opportunity for entrepreneurs. In fact, I don't think there's any better startup opportunity than right here where we sit today. We happen to be in the city of Detroit, in the beautiful historic News Center area, but there are so many great opportunities and ways you could start up here that you couldn't in, say, Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles. And the entrepreneurs certainly have a strong role in shaping Michigan's, well, our new Michigan economy.
Well, you look at the changes that have been made over the last year or two. Fiscal stability, which provides a lot of certainty for these entrepreneurs going forward. Tax changes that were made by the governor and legislature that basically exempt small businesses from paying a business tax. All they have to do is pay the tax through their personal income. Regulations that are being, streamlined and aligned with national standards rather than, their own state standards, and the value that you get for being here, the cost of living, the cost of buying real estate, the cost of acquiring labor that just cannot be matched over in Chicago. It's, the governor says it. We're the value proposition, and we agree with him.
Well, and frankly, for Rick, what you do as regional president of PNC Bank, you play such an important role for entrepreneurs to know that they are going to be able to go to you, for example, and get the startup and the seed money that they need oftentimes to do what they want to do. Money is available.
No, money is available. I've talked about in terms of just the liquidity position of banks right now. We're pretty flush with cash, and given where the interest rates are looking, we're not going to be out there buying bonds anytime soon, so really we need to make loans. And some of these companies really need to be seeded from some funds first and then get a track record before they're ready normally for bank debt. And I think there's a number of funds that are in certain spaces like, say, the life sciences that Doug was mentioning. A fund was just for life science startups. So I think the money is available.
Mm-hmm. And the other thought that comes to my mind, and we have to face this as we speak in such positive terms. I mean, the three of us are very positive in our approach to everything going on. There is a reality here, and the reality is that there have been several plans discussed over the years. Plans on how we were going to fix things, how we were going to move forward, how we were going to grow and really reach our full potential. And these plans have come and gone. These plans were not successful. How is this plan different? What will business leaders' roles be in moving the plan forward and making sure, the business leaders from Michigan, making sure that this really is the plan?
Well, it's the same thing that we did a couple years ago when we came out with the first version of the Michigan Turnaround Plan, which is that we can't do it by ourselves. We've got to engage everybody in Michigan to be part of the solution. And so that means doing things like we're doing today, educating the public, making them aware of what the opportunities are, engaging some of the players that actually have decision-making roles, meaning going up to Lansing, meeting with legislators, getting them to buy into the strategies that we have, and then backing them up so that when they do take positive action, we've got, for example, political action committees to support candidates that support those changes. But as we talk about a new Michigan, Paul W., as we talk about these assets, whether it's the gateway, the engineering opportunities, the mobility industry, the good news is that is not stuff that is dominated by what government does. These are things that we as community leaders have to embrace and make changes on. And so the more we can get conversations like this to happen where we align behind these 6 assets, just align our energy and focus around these 6 assets, we can make great things happen.
And I think the Michigan Business Leaders Board is practicing what they're preaching. If you look at DTE and consumers and the Michigan Business Connect actually using more Michigan-based companies on a lot of different things that they put out for bid. If you look in our case, as I mentioned to you earlier, we made $2.4 billion of loans last year in the state of Michigan. That's not counting renewals. So that's new lending activity. So I think we're practicing what we're preaching, which I think really gets to the credibility issue.
Well, what you're also doing, practicing what you're preaching, and let me sing the praises once again of what you have done, Rick, with PNC. for education and the commitment to our youth, because frankly it starts there. We need to have those kids getting the education that is possible, and otherwise we don't have them leading into these positions that we're hoping they'll reach.
Absolutely. When you go back to our conversation earlier about trying to match jobs with education outcomes, we need to do a better job of starting early and getting our kids proper education, especially in the low and moderate income areas. And that's why we at PNC Bank have such a focus in trying to put a lot of our philanthropy efforts into early childhood education. And otherwise, we're going to be destined to what we were talking about earlier, having this mismatch. And a lot of our families, as you know, when these children go home in some areas, the parents are also illiterate. So if you think about the situation some of these children are in, they go to school many times hungry, and they're behind, and then they get home and there's not that reinforcement from the parent as well. So that's what we really, what PNC is really focused on.
And Doug, you've seen that with other companies here in Michigan.
You know, what's so terrific about this organization, Paul W., is these are kind of the Main Street businesses that people interact with and see every day. You know, these are not companies that are disengaged from their community. They live here, they work here, their families are here, they're invested here, and they have such a stake in the future of Michigan. And it's, why I always joke and say I got the best job in the world, because I work for, 80 folks that are, really are not just business leaders, but they are the community leaders of our state.
There's a lot of pride in Michigan and people in Michigan with that pride. And there are a lot of people listening to us right now here on our PNC Roundtable that are wondering how they might get involved in Michigan's turnaround.
Well, there's a couple things that they can do. First of all, they can go to the website, MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com, and read more about the vision and the ideas that we have to move Michigan to being a top 10 state. If they agree with them, they can contact their state legislators and governor to share their support for these ideas. Second is they can engage their own community groups, whether it's a chamber of commerce or a civic organization they belong to, and encourage them to be made aware of the plans and to try to align their efforts behind it. And then last is the way they engage as an individual. When they talk to people inside our state and outside of our state, to be enthusiastic, to have the feeling that we in fact are already turning our state around and we have a bright future. Because if we don't feel it and if we don't communicate that to people, how are we going to expect other people to feel the same way?
We are often our own worst enemies, and I know people have heard that before, but we really have to be the ambassadors that
absolutely
each and every one of us talking about how great this state is. And if we don't remember it, think of the people who have come here because they were sent here because of their job, for example, and they dreaded the thought of coming. Now they don't want to leave. They love what they have seen and how this is a great place to raise a family, and to everything that Michigan has to offer comes as a shock and a surprise oftentimes to people. And those of us who have lived here most of our lives, or born and raised here, some of us had to leave and luckily could come back, but we sometimes take it for granted. There's an awful lot of good that is here. We see the headlines and watch the news of all the bad, but there's so much more good than bad. Didn't you just recently launch a Facebook campaign to get the public engaged as well?
We did, Paul W. And again, if you go to our Facebook page, Michigan Turnaround Plan, you'll see that there's a contest that you can enter. You can upload photos, videos, stories, whatever it is that is your vision for a new Michigan, and you've got an opportunity to win as much as a $500 prize.
Excellent. And I know Doug Rothwell, President, CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan, you'll stay in touch with us. Let us know how things are going and how we can be of help. And I'll give the last word to my co-host, the Regional President, PNC Bank, Ric DeVore. Lots of hope, lots of good things, but it does take action and it takes involvement from all of us.
It really does. And I'm on a number of boards, as you know, and this one is by far probably the most stimulating board I'm on, just because of the energy level of these executives. Again, when you look at some of these folks, they've done amazing things in their careers. They're not by any means dialing it in, or just, right now. They're more involved than ever.
They're engaged.
They really
don't
are.
Mail that thing in and say, see, I'm spending my money I made a long time ago and I'm having a great time. They really care about how this all turns out.
No, they really do, and I think it gets to the families are here and they care so deeply about it. And I know in my case, I think I maybe appreciate it more just because I left
you left
and
and
came
you
back.
came back.
And so there's a great sense of place with this group, and it's interesting. I was listening to, speaking of Perigo, you mentioned earlier, either you or Doug did, but they have trouble getting people into small Allegan, Michigan. But once they get them there, they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And so that is what, we're just trying to get more positive thoughts about Michigan. And that's not to say there's not challenges, especially here in Detroit. But I think this state really does have a chance now to transform itself.
And now better than ever.
And it's a lot easier when you have 80 Ric DeVores that are trying to help you do it.
Well, that's nice to hear, and nice of you to share that. We're glad we have at least one Ric DeVore, the regional president, PNC Bank, and our co-host on our PNC Roundtable. And we thank you, Doug Rothwell, president, CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan, for all you do all the time.
Thanks, Paul W.
We hope that you'll be with us next time right here at WJR.com. In the meantime, I'll be waking up with you Monday through Friday, 5:30 to 9 on News Talk 760 WJR.